Hello everyone, so today I'm doing it. I'm doing the video. That's always scary to make because it sometimes changes a lot. But right now, this is what the list is, so I'm gonna do it. And that is my top 10 favorite books of all time. Not of this year, not of the past couple months, favorite books I have ever read. Some of these books are pretty recent reads, some of them were before BookTube, and some of them were when I was like a child. So yeah, I mean, I have 10-ish books right here. I kind of cheated on a little bit, but I have 10 books here to talk about. But before I get into it, I want you guys' help, like audience participation. I really want recommendations. If you guys have been following me, I finally finished all of Murakami's novels, and I'm slightly really upset about it. Like, I'm really happy I finally finished, but I'm also so upset because I have nothing to look forward to in reading besides I have short stories, but I never like short stories as much. So I really want an author that's similar to one or two or more of these books that I have, or books that you guys think I would like based on my favorites. Because I'm kind of like, I don't know, I've always been a big fan of unhauling books and just like not bothering with books that I'm not interested in, and I'm trying to focus on books that I think will be 5 out of 5 stars. Like, the books that I think are just gonna be whatever, I'm trying to get rid of and not keep in my life and just focus on reading books that I think are gonna be favorites. So definitely leave down in the comments any recommendations based off of this top 10 list, as well as if you guys happen to know that I have a book on my bookshelf that I haven't read yet, please definitely tell me. But yeah, without any further ado, I'm going to get right on into this list. I'm not going to go into a horrible amount of detail just because my subscribers that have been here for a long time have heard me talk about these books so much. So starting at number 10, we have the book that, if you guys were with me last summer, you are so sick of hearing about this book, but that is I Am a Cat by Natsume Soseki. This book I don't think is for everyone. I think Graham and like 2 other of my friends tried to read this book and were like, Kate, this was so boring. I couldn't make it through 100 pages of it. I must say this is a very slow read and it can get quite boring, but the parts that I loved have stuck with me so much. This book is Natsume Soseki's kind of way of showing what is wrong with the human race through the eyes of a small cat. I read this book, I had a cat when I read this book, and the cat that was described in this one, it just reminded me so much of my kitten, and I just really enjoyed it, and everything the cat kind of said was just, I was like, wow, me too, like, oh my gosh, I agree with this cat. And then the ending was just so, oh my god, I almost started crying, and I don't really get that emotional over books, so I, of course, really enjoyed this book. I don't think it's for everyone. It's a big book, and it's very old style written Japanese, and there are definitely parts that are boring, but the parts that are good are amazing. The next one is a more recent favorite. I think it's the only book that I read this year. Oh no, one other book that I read this year is here. But this was a book that I read this year for the first time ever, and I ended up really enjoying it, and that is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. This is my second favorite classic. My favorite classic is a little higher on the list, but I read this book for the first time ever this year, and I fell in love. I fell in love with the character of Peter Pan, and obviously I have been reading so many Peter Pan retellings, and I absolutely loved it. It is all tabbed up, and yeah, I ended up just absolutely loving this book and loving the character of Peter Pan, so it had to be on this list somewhere. Number 8, I kind of cheated just because I genuinely couldn't pick. And this is like an entire author kind of, and just because I read all of his books when I was a kid, I think I was like 8, 9, 10-ish. I want to say it was before middle school. I was in elementary school and I read all of his books. You might be like, that's kind of young to be reading this guy's books, but I've read them since then too, and I just absolutely love every single one of them equally, so I really couldn't pick, and that is H.G. Wells's books. I specifically own The Invisible Man, The War of the Worlds, The First Men in the Moon, and The Time Machine. I also actually have The Sleeper Awakens, but I have not read that one. I don't know how I managed to miss that one, but I basically went to the library as a kid and I just read all of his books. and I enjoyed them so much. This kind of got me on my love of sci-fi, because I already really liked fantasy. This got me on a love for sci-fi. And yeah, all of his books are so small. They're basically more like novellas, but they are all just so much fun and make such an impactful statement on the world. And I love H.G. Wells so much. He is one of my favorite authors. He's someone that I don't get to talk about that much on this channel because, again, I read them when I was a kid, and I read them, I think, in high school again, but I really haven't gotten to reread them. I reread The Time Machine, actually, last year, and I talked about it, obviously, but this is an author I definitely feel like I don't get to talk that much about. And I love all of his works, so I'm really actually excited to read The Sleeper Awakens, because I don't think I've read that one. I might have, and I just don't remember, but I don't think I've read that one. And I have a copy of it now, so I get to read it. The next one is a book I read a couple of years ago, and I really freaking loved it. And I don't even necessarily know why, because since then I've read quite a few books I think are very similar to it, but this was like the first. This was the first of the books that were in this kind of vein, and that is Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. I loved this book. I picked it up completely on a whim when I was in a horrible reading slump back in 2015. I was in a horrible reading slump for like 6 months, 7 months or something, and this was a book that I read during it, and it just reminded me how much I love reading. And I obviously have a bunch of tabs and stuff, and I just enjoyed this book so much. I don't remember necessarily all of the different details of this book anymore. I feel like I definitely need to reread it soon, but this is about a girl who is basically sold off to as a child to someone, and then she becomes a geisha to be able to pay back the person. And she becomes one of like the most well-known geisha ever. Again, I've read quite a few books since reading this that are in the same vein that I didn't enjoy as much, because I think I enjoyed this one so much because it was like the first. But this has so much information about it, and Arthur Golden, I feel like, definitely did his research. And yeah, I mean, this is so classic. I think everyone who reads this ends up really enjoying it, or at least I know actually several people that this is their favorite book of all time. So this is a good book. This is a really good book. Number 6 is my favorite classic of all time, and I'm going to hold it up, and I feel like a lot of people that I know get really like, I don't know, like flashbacks to high school when I tell them what my favorite classic is, but that is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I know a lot of people in my school who, anytime I was like, oh yeah, Lord of the Flies was my favorite, who were like, oh, I hated that book, how did you like it so much? And I absolutely loved it. It's about a plane of English school kids who get thrown onto an island and start killing each other. I mean, that sounds like a great time to me. But no, I just really liked all of the different things this book talked about in such a unique way. And again, I feel like it was kind of the first of the books that I read that was similar to this. And I loved it. I loved the character. Simon is my child. And just, I love this book, okay? I'm sorry if you guys had a bad experience in high school. I love this book. Number 5 is another one that I'm cheating slightly. I feel like these are gonna be slightly surprising just because the first book of these that I've read was not in my favorites video for last year, even though I read it last year. And this one, and the one I read this year, during my review, I only had given it 4.5 out of 5 stars. But since I have kind of ignored the fact that they're YA, and I have bumped them up to 5 stars, and I put them on my favorites list because I freaking love them both so much, and I can't pick which one, and that is Willful Machines and Tattoo Atlas by Tim Florine. You guys have heard me talking about these books since last December when I first read Willful Machines. They are amazing. I love them so much. They are, again, not literature. That's the thing, is they don't fit in with the rest of these books that I can be like, these books made me think so much. No, these are just enjoyable as heck, and they have the most amazing storytelling I have ever read in my life. Both of these I basically read in a single sitting, and they are just so great. Tim Florine is so talented. I need another book ASAP. I love these books so much. Tattoo Atlas is about a slightly futuristic world where a scientist is trying to fix a boy who committed a school shooting and make him not a psychopath. And then Willful Machines is in a much more futuristic world where there is a robot who downloaded herself into the internet and is committing acts of terrorism, and it's about the president's son, and both of these have a slight LGBT gay romance to them, but I really like the fact that the romance is not at the forefront. It is definitely taking a backseat to the rest of the plot, but yes, these are so great, I can't stop talking about them. So number 4 on this list is a recent read. I just read it last November, I believe, and that is Tell the Wolves I'm Home by Carol Rifka Brint. I love this book so much. I think I just have a very personal connection to this book. I think I read it at the correct time in my life. Obviously, I have a lot of notes on this book, and again, I don't know if I had read it at a different time if I would have enjoyed it as much as I did. Basically, this is about a young girl who her uncle dies, and her uncle's boyfriend kind of reaches out to her to become closer. And I explain it in my full review that I read this about a year after my grandma died. And like June and her uncle, I was extremely close to my grandma. Like, we were best friends, and when she died, my grandpa reached out to me. So it was a very similar story to my own and made me really, really emotional and like on a personal level. Which is why I think I enjoyed this book so much, because I have seen quite a few people saying that they didn't like this book that much, and were surprised that I loved it so much. So I definitely think I just read this at the perfect time in my life, and I was able to connect to it so much because of that. Okay, the top 3 I feel like aren't going to be big surprises. Number 3 is, of course, The Lord of the Rings. Like, guys, this had to be somewhere. Of course, it's number 3. Lord of the Rings. What can I say about Lord of the Rings? Lord of the Rings, if you guys wanted to know, number 1 and 2 are not Harry Potter. I don't care about Harry Potter that much. Sorry. Lord of the Rings was my Harry Potter. When I was a kid, my parents did try to make me read Harry Potter, because that's what everyone reads as a child. And I just didn't care for it. I thought they were really, really boring. And then my mom decided to have me try The Hobbit. And I liked The Hobbit, it was okay. But then, of course, I decided to go on to The Lord of the Rings. And since I have reread these like 3 or 4 times, and I love them so much. I don't read them that often because they do take up a little bit of time reading them. But I love The Lord of the Rings so much. It has such a special place in my heart because it was my childhood read. It was the book that got, like, not the book that got me into reading, but got me into more serious reading, because I read these when I was 4th grade, I want to say, so I was like 9-10 years old or so. So yeah, so at the same time everyone else was reading Harry Potter, I was reading these books. And they made me fall in love with fantasy and magic, and just kind of fall in love with going into a book to learn about different worlds. And I love these books so much because even though there were books before it, when I think of my childhood reads, I think of these books. And of course, they're also just classics. These, like, the amount of people who say that they don't like Lord of the Rings, like, shocks me, or haven't read The Lord of the Rings, shocks me, because, like, guys, these are the foundation of all of those YA fantasy novels that you guys read, or any novels that you read. These are the foundation for them. You have to read these. And number 2, do I even have to hold it up? Guys, of course it's Wind Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. I just did my redone Haruki Murakami recommendations, and I did a Murakami rankings video, so I'll link those both down below. Murakami is my favorite author of all time. I wanted to put more books by him on this list, but they just didn't fit, so this is my one Murakami on this list, and I love it so much. This needs a dire reread because I have completely forgotten certain details of this book, but it is a long one and it's got all my notes in it. And yeah, I mean, this book, it was that book that after that really long slump that I had for like 7-8 months or so, it made me fall in love with reading again. It got me into adult reading too, because I think I was in that slump for so long because I kept trying to pick up YA books and I didn't like YA anymore, and this finally just made me fall in love with reading. And I read this entire 600-page novel in like 2 days after reading like 1 or 2 books a month for the months before that. and also this book is just great. Like, ignoring all of the side things that it helped me through, it's just a great book. It's about Toru Okada, who literally goes through this crazy psychedelic kind of adventure because his cat goes missing. Like, how great of a storyline can you have? And yeah, I love this book so much. So, of course it's number 2. And number 1, again, do I really need to hold it up? Actually, for you newbies who thought I was gonna hold up Harry Potter, yeah, I guess I do. And that is Three Souls by Janny Chang. This has been my all-time favorite book since I read it back in 2013, which I believe is when it actually came out. Did it come out in 2013? Yep, 2013 is when it first came out. I read this book, I fell in love with it, and I've read it every single year since then. I love this book so much. Obviously, you can see how many times I've read it. There's so many highlights and dog-eared pages and tabs. This book is very well loved. Again, this is my favorite book of all time. It is, I have a review of it, I think, on my channel, and I think I'm gonna, like, try to redo it after I reread it this year, because it's just so hard to get across how much I love this book. Like, when people, like, think of how much you love Harry Potter, or whatever your favorite book is, like, trying to explain why I love this book, especially to people who look at it and go, I've never even heard of that. How is that your favorite book? It's just so hard. I love this book so much. And again, I think I read it at a good time in my life, and it's always a book that I can go back to. I always know it's going to make me happy, and it's always going to make me think. This book follows a young girl named Leguin and her family during the 1930s, where there are riots from the communists, and she falls in love with a communist kind of leader, Han Chin, who she falls in love with as a little girl, and he comes back to her later in life, and it is a love story, betrayal, revenge story, because she is actually dead at the beginning of this book, and she's looking back on her life to figure out why she's not allowed to go to heaven. I love this book so much. Like, I love this book so much. It gets me through some hard times. I always pick it up when I'm feeling homesick at school, or if I just need a break from life, I just pick this up. And it's gotten me through a lot. So anyways, those are my favorite books. Those are my favorite books of all time that I have ever read. Ever. And who knows, this list might change in a couple of years or even next month, who knows. But right now, at this time in my life, these are my favorite books. I doubt that the top 3 are ever gonna change, but who knows, they might. But yeah, definitely leave down in the comments those recommendations that I asked from you guys, and leave me your favorite book. I will definitely be checking out everyone else's favorite book, unless it's Harry Potter. I'm sorry guys, I've read Harry Potter and I don't care for it that much. But anyways, I love you all, and I will see y'all soon. Bye!